The great hall buzzed with the kind of restless energy that only the first night back at Hogwarts could summon. The long tables, polished to a gleam under the enchanted ceiling, were packed with students, their voices a chaotic symphony of laughter, whispers, and the occasional clatter of goblets. The ceiling above mirrored the September sky, deep indigo streaked with wisps of cloud, stars just beginning to prick through. You sat at your house table, wedged between your best friend, Lila, who was already dissecting her summer with rapid-fire enthusiasm, and a nervous first year who kept glancing at the sorting hat like it might bite. Your robes smelled faintly of the train's coal smoke, and your stomach growled, eager for the feast that hadn't yet appeared. The air felt alive, heavy with the promise of a new year, but you had no idea just how extraordinary this one would be. The golden plates before you were still empty, a fact Lila was loudly complaining about. If I don't get some roast beef soon, I might start chewing on my wand, she muttered, twirling said wand between her fingers like a baton. You grinned, about to suggest she try summoning a snack, when a hush rippled through the hall. Heads turned toward the staff table, where Professor Dumbledore stood, his silver beard catching the candlelight. His presence alone could quiet a room, but tonight his eyes held a spark of something mischievous, something that made your skin prickle with anticipation. The other professors, McGonagall with her sharp gaze, Snape brooding in his corner, Flitwick practically bouncing in his seat, seemed to share a secret they weren't quite ready to spill. "Welcome, welcome," Dumbledore's voice boomed, warm and resonant, cutting through the last murmurs. "To another year at Hogwarts." Cheers erupted, loudest from the Gryffindor table, though your own house wasn't far behind. You clapped along, but your eyes stayed on Dumbledore, who raised a hand for silence. "I trust you're all as eager as I am for the feast. But before we indulge, I have an announcement that may stir some excitement." Lila leaned closer, her elbow knocking into yours. "What's he on about? New Quidditch rules?" You shrugged, but the air felt charged now, like the moment before a spell takes shape. Dumbledore's smile widened, and he spread his arms as if embracing the entire hall. "After many years, a grand tradition is returning to Hogwarts," he said. "The Triwizard Tournament." The words hit like a stupefy spell. The hall exploded into gasps, shouts, and a few dropped goblets. Lila grabbed your arm, her nails digging in. "Did he just say Triwizard Tournament?" she hissed. You nodded. too stunned to speak. You'd heard stories, whispered legends of champions, dangerous tasks, and eternal glory. The tournament was the stuff of history books, banned decades ago after too many champions met gruesome ends. Your mind raced with half-remembered tales. A wizard devoured by a manticore, a witch who never returned from a cursed maze. Yet here was Dumbledore, announcing its return as casually as if he were introducing a new defense against the dark arts teacher. Dumbledore raised his hand again, and the hall quieted, though the energy crackled like static. The Triwizard Tournament, he continued, is a magical competition between 3 great schools: Hogwarts, Bedtime, and Durmstrang. One champion from each will compete in a series of tasks designed to test their skill, courage, and ingenuity. The winner will not only earn glory for their school, but a prize of 1,000 galleons. 1,000 galleons. The number sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. You could practically see the Gryffindors calculating how many Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, products that could buy. Lila's eyes gleamed. "Imagine what you could do with that," she whispered. "A new broom, a lifetime supply of chocolate frogs. Or a dragon," you quipped, though your heart wasn't in it. Your mind was still on the tournament. Dangerous. Yes, but the idea of it, magic, pushed to its limits. Champions proving themselves under the eyes of the entire wizarding world. Set your pulse racing. You weren't old enough to enter, not at 16. But the thought of watching it unfold at Hogwarts felt like a privilege. Dumbledore went on, explaining the rules. Only students 17 or older could submit their names to the Goblet of Fire, a magical artifact that would choose the champions. An impartial judge, he called it, though the twinkle in his eye suggested he knew it had a flair for the dramatic. "The tasks will be perilous," he said, his tone growing serious. "But we have chose every precaution to ensure the safety of our champions. The Ministry, along with our esteemed guests from Bedtime and Durmstrang, has worked tirelessly to revive this tradition in a manner both thrilling and secure." The hall buzzed again. Students already whispering names of potential champions. At the Gryffindor table, a 7th year named Marcus Flint was being slapped on the back, his grin wide enough to show he was already imagining himself a victor. Over at Slytherin, a tall girl with a sharp jawline was shaking her head, clearly unimpressed by the hype. You scanned your own table, wondering who might dare to enter. Lila nudged you. "Bet you Amara Valen puts her name in," she said, nodding toward a Ravenclaw sixth year, known for her uncanny knack with enchantments. She's been charming her quills to write her essays since third year. You nodded, picturing Amara's steady hands, weaving spells that made your own charms look like first-year fumbles. She'd be brilliant, you said, though the thought of her facing something like a dragon made your stomach twist. The stories of past tournaments weren't all glory. Some were tragedies. You glanced at Dumbledore, wondering how he could stand there so calmly, knowing what might lie ahead, as if reading your thoughts. Dumbledore's gaze swept the hall, lingering just long enough to make you feel seen. This tournament is not merely about competition, he said. It is about unity, about the bonds we forge across borders, and the courage we discover within ourselves. I urge you all to embrace this year with open hearts and fearless spirits. The hall burst into applause, though you noticed Snape's hands remained firmly crossed. McGonagall, on the other hand, looked almost proud, her lips pressed into a tight but approving line. The first year next to you was practically vibrating with excitement, whispering to his friend about wanting to see a real dragon. You smiled, remembering your own first year, when everything at Hogwarts felt like a miracle. Dumbledore clapped his hands, and the golden plates filled with food, roast beef, Yorkshire puddings, heaps of mashed potatoes swimming in gravy. The feast had begun, but the conversation was all tournament. Lila was already speculating about the tasks. Bet it's something with fire, she said, spearing a carrot. Or maybe a duel. Think they'll have to fight each other? No way, you said, though you weren't sure. Dumbledore said it's about skill, not just brawling. Still, the idea of a duel sent a shiver down your spine. You could picture it, wands flashing, spells colliding in bursts of light. You'd seen Amara in Charms class, turning a teacup into a singing finch with a flick of her wrist. If anyone could hold their own, it was her. As you ate, the hall grew louder, students swapping stories of past champions. Someone mentioned Cedric Diggory's father, a champion from decades ago who'd faced a basilisk and lived. Another swore they'd heard of a witch who'd outsmarted a sphinx with a riddle of her own. The names floated like spells, each one adding to the myth of the tournament. You listened, your fork hovering over your plate, caught up in the magic of it all. This wasn't just a school year. It was a chance to witness history. By the time dessert appeared, treacle tarts, pumpkin pasties, and towers of chocolate gâteau, the Great Hall felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. You glanced at Dumbledore, who was now chatting with Flitwick, his eyes still twinkling. The Triwizard Tournament was back, and with it, a year that promised to be unlike any other. You didn't know what the tasks would bring, or who would emerge as champion. But one thing was certain. Hogwarts was about to become a stage for something extraordinary. And you had a front row seat. The week following Dumbledore's announcement felt like Hogwarts was holding its breath. Every whisper and glance charged with anticipation for the Triwizard Tournament. Classes dragged as students speculated about the tasks, the champions, and, most pressingly, the arrival of the other schools. You'd overheard a Hufflepuff swear the Beau's Baton students would arrive on flying horses, while a Slytherin insisted Durmstrang would tunnel in like goblins. Lila, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes at both theories, but couldn't hide her own excitement. "They're not going to just walk in," she said one evening in the common room, her charms textbook forgotten on her lap. "It's got to be something big." You agreed, though you couldn't shake a nervous flutter at the thought of sharing Hogwarts with strangers. Would they be friendly? Arrogant? Would they think your spells were amateurish? The answer came on a crisp October morning, when the entire school was summoned to the grounds overlooking the Black Lake. You stood with your house, bundled in your cloak against the autumn chill, the grass damp under your boots. The sky was a pale, endless gray, and the lake lay still, its surface like polished obsidian. Lila nudged you, pointing at the first years huddled nearby, their eyes wide as if expecting a dragon to burst from the water. "Bet they think we're about to fight a kraken," she whispered, and you stifled a laugh. The professors lined up along the shore, Dumbledore at the center, his robes a deep plum that stood out against the muted landscape. McGonagall's hat was tilted at a stern angle, and even Snape seemed less dour than usual, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. A murmur rippled through the crowd as a speck appeared in the sky, growing larger with every passing second. You squinted, your heart quickening. It wasn't a flock of birds or a stray hippogriff. It was a sleigh, massive and gleaming, pulled through the air by a team of silver-winged reindeer. Their antlers glinted like polished metal, and their hooves left faint trails of frost in the air. The sleigh itself was a work of art, carved from pale wood and inlaid with patterns that shimmered like mother of pearl. Gasps rose from the crowd, and Lila grabbed your arm. "Beau Baton," she breathed. "Has to be." The sleigh descended, with impossible grace, landing on the grass with barely a sound. The reindeer shook their heads, sending a faint mist of ice into the air. And the sleigh's door opened. Out stepped Madame Olympe Maxime, headmistress of Beauxbatons, her presence as commanding as the sleigh itself. She was tall, taller than Hagrid. Even her fur-trimmed robes flowing like a river of sapphire. Behind her came her students, a dozen or so, all dressed in pale blue silk that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. Their movements were elegant, almost choreographed, as if they'd practiced walking in formation. You noticed their eyes scanning the crowd, some curious, others haughty, and you wondered what they thought of Hogwarts' mismatched towers and sprawling grounds compared to their own school. Dumbledore strode forward, his arms wide in welcome. Madame Maxime, a pleasure to see you again, he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs. Welcome to Hogwarts. Maxime inclined her head, her expression warm but regal, and the two exchanged words you couldn't hear. The Beauxbatons students stood in a neat line, their breath visible in the chilly air, and you caught a few of them whispering in rapid French, their accents sharp and melodic. One girl, with hair like spun gold, met your gaze and offered a small, curious smile. You smiled back, feeling a mix of nerves and intrigue. Who was she? A potential champion? A friend? Before you could ponder further, a low rumble shook the ground, and the black lake began to churn. Waves lapped at the shore, and a shadow rose from the depths. A ship, its hull carved from dark ice that glistened with an eerie, bluish glow. Its sails were tattered, yet somehow majestic, billowing without wind, and its prow was shaped like a snarling wolf. The crowd gasped again, louder this time, and even the Beauxbatons students turned to watch, their composure slipping into awe. Durmstrang, Lila whispered, her voice tinged with something like reverence. You nodded, your throat tight. The ship was nothing like the sleek elegance of the Beauxbatons' sleigh. It was raw, primal, like something dredged from a Norse myth. The ship docked itself with a groan, and a gangplank extended to the shore. Leading the Durmstrang delegation was High Master Igor Karkaroff, his fur cloak heavy and his beard streaked with gray. His smile was tight, almost forced, as he greeted Dumbledore, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the scene. Behind him came his students, all male, their heavy boots thudding against the gangplank. They wore blood-red robes, and their faces were hard, as if carved from the same ice as their ship. One boy, broad-shouldered and taller than the rest, scanned the crowd with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. You heard a Slytherin nearby whisper his name, Tomas Skorik, a duelist rumored to have never lost a match. Dumbledore's voice broke through the tension. "Hi, Master Karkaroff. Welcome to Hogwarts. May your students find warmth and camaraderie within our walls." Karkaroff's nod was curt, but Dumbledore's smile didn't falter. He turned to the gathered students, his eyes twinkling. "Our guests will join us for the duration of the Triwizard Tournament. I trust you will make them feel at home." The crowd dispersed, students buzzing with excitement as they headed back to the castle. You and Lila lingered, watching the Beaux Batons students glide toward the entrance, their sleigh now parked near the greenhouses, its reindeer nibbling at the grass. The Durmstrang ship remained in the lake, its icy hull glinting under the weak sun. "They're so different," you said, half to yourself. Lila snorted. "Yeah, one lot looks like they're off to a ball, and the other like they're ready to wrestle a troll." That night, the great hall was transformed. The house tables had been extended to accommodate the guests, and you found yourself sharing your dorm with a Beaux Batons girl named Claire. She was the one who'd smiled at you earlier, and up close, you noticed her eyes were a startling green, like new leaves. She spoke English with a lilting accent, her words precise but warm. "Your castle, it is wild," she said, setting her trunk at the foot of a spare bed. "Ours is more orderly." You laughed, thinking of Hogwarts' shifting staircases and hidden rooms. "You'll get used to it," you said, though you weren't sure she would. Claire unpacked with care, revealing a stack of books, a silver wand, and a small vial of what looked like glowing ink. "For letters," she explained, catching your curious glance. "It shines under moonlight." You wanted to ask more, but a Durmstrang boy appeared in the corridor, his red robes stark against the stone walls. He didn't speak, just nodded politely before heading to his own dorm. The air felt different now, charged with the presence of strangers who brought their own magic, their own stories. You lay awake that night, listening to Claire's soft breathing and the distant creak of the castle settling. The tournament hadn't even started, but already Hogwarts felt bigger, wilder, alive with possibility. The next morning, you joined Claire for breakfast, where the Beaux Batons students sat in a tight cluster, sipping tea and nibbling on pastries they'd brought themselves. The Durmstrang boys, meanwhile, attacked their plates like they hadn't eaten in days, though Thomas Skorick sat apart, his eyes scanning the hall as if memorizing every face. Lila slid into the seat beside you, her plate piled high with bacon. "So," she said, grinning, "think we'll survive living with this lot?" You glanced at Claire, who was explaining a French charm to a curious Hufflepuff, then at the Durmstrang boy, who'd nodded to you last night, now laughing with a Gryffindor over a shared joke. "Yeah," you said, a smile tugging at your lips. "I think we'll do just fine." The week following Dumbledore's announcement felt like Hogwarts was holding its breath. Every whisper and glance charged with anticipation for the Triwizard Tournament. Classes dragged as students speculated about the tasks, the champions, and, most pressingly, the arrival of the other schools. You'd overheard a Hufflepuff swear the Beaux Batons students would arrive on flying horses, while a Slytherin insisted Durmstrang would tunnel in like goblins. Lila, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes at both theories, but couldn't hide her own excitement. "They're not going to just walk in," she said one evening in the common room, her charms textbook forgotten on her lap. "It's got to be something big." You agreed, though you couldn't shake a nervous flutter at the thought of sharing Hogwarts with strangers. Would they be friendly? Arrogant? Would they think your spells were amateurish? The answer came on a crisp October morning, when the entire school was summoned to the grounds overlooking the Black Lake. You stood with your house, bundled in your cloak against the autumn chill, the grass damp under your boots. The sky was a pale, endless gray, and the lake lay still, its surface like polished obsidian. Lila nudged you, pointing at the first years huddled nearby, their eyes wide as if expecting a dragon to burst from the water. "Bet they think we're about to fight a kraken," she whispered, and you stifled a laugh. The professors lined up along the shore, Dumbledore at the center, his robes a deep plum that stood out against the muted landscape. McGonagall's hat was tilted at a stern angle, and even Snape seemed less dour than usual, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. A murmur rippled through the crowd as a speck appeared in the sky, growing larger with every passing second. You squinted, your heart quickening. It wasn't a flock of birds or a stray hippogriff. It was a sleigh, massive and gleaming, pulled through the air by a team of silver-winged reindeer. Their antlers glinted like polished metal, and their hooves left faint trails of frost in the air. The sleigh itself was a work of art, carved from pale wood and inlaid with patterns that shimmered like mother of pearl. Gasps rose from the crowd, and Lila grabbed your arm. "Beau batons," she breathed. "Has to be." The sleigh descended with impossible grace, landing on the grass with barely a sound. The reindeer shook their heads, sending a faint mist of ice into the air, and the sleigh's door opened. Out stepped Madame Olympe Maxime, headmistress of Beau's Baton, her presence as commanding as the sleigh itself. She was tall, taller than Hagrid, even, her fur-trimmed robes flowing like a river of sapphire. Behind her came her students, a dozen or so, all dressed in pale blue silk that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. Their movements were elegant, almost choreographed, as if they'd practiced walking in formation. You noticed their eyes scanning the crowd, some curious, others haughty, and you wondered what they thought of Hogwarts' mismatched towers and sprawling grounds compared to their own school. Dumbledore strode forward, his arms wide in welcome. "Madame Maxime, a pleasure to see you again," he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "Welcome to Hogwarts." Maxime inclined her head, her expression warm but regal, and the two exchanged words you couldn't hear. The Beauxbatons students stood in a neat line, their breath visible in the chilly air, and you caught a few of them whispering in rapid French, their accents sharp and melodic. One girl, with hair like spun gold, met your gaze and offered a small, curious smile. You smiled back, feeling a mix of nerves and intrigue. Who was she? A potential champion? A friend? Before you could ponder further, a low rumble shook the ground, and the black lake began to churn. Waves lapped at the shore, and a shadow rose from the depths. A ship, its hull carved from dark ice that glistened with an eerie, bluish glow. Its sails were tattered, yet somehow majestic, billowing without wind, and its prow was shaped like a snarling wolf. The crowd gasped again, louder this time, and even the Beauxbatons students turned to watch, their composure slipping into awe. "Durmstrang," Lila whispered, her voice tinged with something like reverence. You nodded, your throat tight. The ship was nothing like the sleek elegance of the Beauxbatons' sleigh. It was raw, primal, like something dredged from a Norse myth. The ship docked itself with a groan, and a gangplank extended to the shore. Leading the Dormstrang delegation was High Master Igor Karkaroff, his fur cloak heavy and his beard streaked with gray. His smile was tight, almost forced, as he greeted Dumbledore, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the scene. Behind him came his students, all male, their heavy boots thudding against the gangplank. They wore blood-red robes, and their faces were hard, as if carved from the same ice as their ship. One boy, broad-shouldered and taller than the rest, scanned the crowd with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. You heard a Slytherin nearby whisper his name, Tomas Skorik, a duelist rumored to have never lost a match. Dumbledore's voice broke through the tension. High Master Karkaroff, welcome to Hogwarts. May your students find warmth and camaraderie within our walls. Karkaroff's nod was curt, but Dumbledore's smile didn't falter. He turned to the gathered students, his eyes twinkling. Our guests will join us for the duration of the Triwizard Tournament. I trust you will make them feel at home. The crowd dispersed, students buzzing with excitement as they headed back to the castle. You and Lila lingered, watching the Beaux Batons students glide toward the entrance, their sleigh now parked near the greenhouses, its reindeer nibbling at the grass. The Durmstrang ship remained in the lake, its icy hull glinting under the weak sun. They're so different, you said, half to yourself. Lila snorted. Yeah, one lot looks like they're off to a ball, and the other like they're ready to wrestle a troll. That night, the great hall was transformed. The house tables had been extended to accommodate the guests, and you found yourself sharing your dorm with a Beaux Batons girl named Claire. She was the one who'd smiled at you earlier, and up close, you noticed her eyes were a startling green, like new leaves. She spoke English with a lilting accent, her words precise, but warm. Your castle? It is wild, she said, setting her trunk at the foot of a spare bed. Ours is more orderly. You laughed, thinking of Hogwarts' shifting staircases and hidden rooms. You'll get used to it, you said, though you weren't sure she would. Claire unpacked with care, revealing a stack of books, a silver wand, and a small vial of what looked like glowing ink. For letters, she explained, catching your curious glance. It shines under moonlight. You wanted to ask more, but a Durmstrang boy appeared in the corridor, his red robes stark against the stone walls. He didn't speak, just nodded politely before heading to his own dorm. The air felt different now, charged with the presence of strangers who brought their own magic, their own stories. You lay awake that night, listening to Claire's soft breathing and the distant creak of the castle settling. The tournament hadn't even started, but already Hogwarts felt bigger, wilder, alive with possibility. The next morning, you joined Claire for breakfast, where the Beaux Batons students sat in a tight cluster, sipping tea and nibbling on pastries they'd brought themselves. The Durmstrang boys, meanwhile, attacked their plates like they hadn't eaten in days, though Tomas Skorik sat apart, his eyes scanning the hall as if memorizing every face. Lila slid into the seat beside you, her plate piled high with bacon. "So," she said, grinning, "think we'll survive living with this lot?" You glanced at Claire, who was explaining a French charm to a curious Hufflepuff, then at the Durmstrang boy, who'd nodded to you last night, now laughing with a Gryffindor over a shared joke. "Yeah," you said, a smile tugging at your lips. "I think we'll do just fine." The days following the arrival of Beaux Batons and Durmstrang were a whirlwind of whispers and wagers. The castle humming with speculation about who would dare enter the Triwizard Tournament. You and Lila spent every spare moment debating potential champions, your conversations spilling from the common room to the corridors, where enchanted banners now fluttered with the crests of all three schools. The Goblet of Fire, the tournament's impartial judge, had been placed in the entrance hall, and it was impossible to pass without stopping to stare. The goblet stood on a plinth, its rough wooden surface etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue, flames licking upward like liquid sapphire. Students gathered around it, some daring to toss in scraps of parchment with their names, others just watching, awed by its quiet power. You weren't old enough to enter. 17 was the cutoff, a rule enforced by an age line drawn by Dumbledore himself, shimmering like a golden thread around the goblet. Lila, who was 16 like you, had no qualms about this. "Good," she said one afternoon as you lingered near the goblet, watching a cocky Slytherin 7th year named Marcus Flint stride through the age line to drop his name in. "Let the older ones risk their necks. I'd rather watch." You nodded, but your eyes were fixed on the flames, which seemed to flicker with a life of their own. The idea of putting your name in felt both thrilling and terrifying, like standing at the edge of the Black Lake and wondering what lurked beneath. Your friend Amara Valen, however, had no such reservations. You'd known Amara since your first year, when she'd charmed your quill to write your name in perfect cursive during a particularly dull history of magic class. A Ravenclaw 6th year with a knack for enchantments. She was brilliant, but quiet, her dark eyes always scanning the world like she was solving a puzzle. You ran into her in the library the day before the choosing ceremony, her nose buried in a tome on ancient, magical artifacts. "You're entering, aren't you?" you asked, sliding into the chair across from her. She looked up, her lips twitching into a small smile. "Already did," she said, tapping her wand against the book. "This morning, the goblet. It's strange. It felt like it was watching me." Her voice was calm, but you caught a flicker of nerves in her eyes. You wanted to ask more, how it felt, whether she was scared. But Madame Pince's glare silenced you both. Instead, you squeezed Amara's hand and whispered, "You'll be amazing." She smiled again, but it was tighter this time, and you left the library wondering what kind of courage it took to offer your name to a magical fire that could choose your fate. The choosing ceremony arrived on a Friday night, the great hall packed to bursting with students from all 3 schools. The house tables had been pushed to the walls, replaced by rows of benches facing a dais where the Goblet of Fire glowed, its flames now a vivid indigo that cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. The enchanted ceiling mirrored a stormy sky, clouds churning as if echoing the tension below. You sat with Lila and Claire, the Beaux Batons girl you'd grown fond of, her green eyes wide as she whispered about the goblet's magic. "It chooses not just skill," she said, her French accent softening the words. "It sees destiny." You shivered, unsure if it was her words or the chill in the air. Dumbledore stood before the goblet, his robes a deep silver that shimmered like moonlight. The other headmasters flanked him, Madame Maxime, her presence towering, and Karkaroff, his eyes darting as if he suspected the goblet might cheat. "Tonight," Dumbledore began, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "the Goblet of Fire will select 3 champions, one from each school, to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. Its judgment is final, its choices binding. Let us see who it deems worthy." The hall fell silent, every eye on the goblet as its flames flared higher, turning a brilliant white. A parchment shot out, fluttering like a moth before landing in Dumbledore's hand. He unfolded it, his face unreadable. "The champion for Beauxbatons," he announced, "is Elodie Marchand, A cheer erupted from the Beaux Batons students, their blue robes a sea of waving hands. Elodie, a slight girl with auburn hair and a serene smile, rose from her bench. You'd seen her in the grounds, whispering to a flock of birds that followed her like pets, a beast whisperer. Claire had called her, and you could believe it. There was something almost otherworldly about her calm. She stepped onto the dais, bowing to Dumbledore before disappearing through a side door to the champion's chamber. The goblet flared again, spitting out another parchment. "The champion for Durmstrang," Dumbledore said, "is Tomas Skorrick." The Durmstrang boys roared, thumping their fists on the benches. Tomas, the broad-shouldered duelist you'd seen on the ship, strode forward with a confidence that filled the room. His red robes swished, and his handshake with Dumbledore was firm, almost challenging. You caught Lila's eye. She was grinning, clearly impressed. "He looks like he could wrestle a dragon," she whispered. You nodded, but something about Tomas's sharp gaze made you uneasy, like he was already calculating his next move. The flames surged a third time, and the hall held its breath. "The champion for Hogwarts," Dumbledore said, his voice warm with pride, "is Amara Valen." Your heart leaped as the Ravenclaw table exploded into cheers. Amara stood, her movement steady, but her face pale. You clapped until your hands stung, pride swelling in your chest. She was one of yours, a friend, a Hogwarts student, a girl who could make quills sing and mirrors reflect truths. As she crossed the dais, she glanced your way, and you gave her a thumbs up. Her smile was fleeting, but real before she followed the others through the door. The goblet's flames died down, returning to their soft blue glow. And Dumbledore dismissed the hall. Students spilled out, buzzing with excitement. But you lingered, staring at the goblet. Leela tugged your sleeve. "Come on. Let's find Amara," she said. But you shook your head, needing a moment. The weight of the moment settled over you. The tournament was real now. The champions chosen. Amara, Elodie, Tomet. 3 names that would carry the hopes of their schools. Their fates tied to tasks no one yet knew. You thought of Amara's quiet courage, Elodie's serene grace, Tomas's fierce determination. The goblet had seen something in them, something you couldn't yet name. As you finally left the hall, Claire fell into step beside you, her vial of moonlight ink glinting in her pocket. "Your friend, Amara," she said softly. "She is special, yes?" You nodded, your throat tight. "Yeah, she is." The castle felt different as you climbed the stairs to your dorm, the air thick with magic and possibility. The Triwizard Tournament had begun, and though you weren't a champion, you felt like you were part of something bigger, something that would change Hogwarts forever. The weeks leading up to the first task were a blur of anticipation and nerves, the castle practically vibrating with the energy of the Triwizard Tournament. Every corridor buzzed with rumors about what the champions would face. Some said a dragon, others a horde of Cornish pixies gone rogue. You and Lila spent hours debating in the common room, your textbooks neglected as you sketched out wild scenarios on scraps of parchment. Amara, now a champion, was quieter than usual, often found in the library, poring over books on elemental magic. You'd tried to ask her about the task, but she'd only smiled tightly and said, "I'll know when I know." Her calm was inspiring, but you could see the strain in her eyes, and it made your stomach twist with worry. The morning of the first task dawned cold and clear. The November sky a pale blue that made the Forbidden Forest look sharper, its edges etched against the horizon. The entire school was summoned to a clearing just beyond the Quidditch pitch, where a massive arena had been conjured overnight. Wooden stands rose in tiers, draped with banners bearing the crests of Hogwarts, bows, batons, and Durmstrang. The air smelled of frost and pine, and the crowd was a sea of scarves and cloaks, students jostling for the best seats. You and Lila squeezed into a spot near the front, Claire on your other side, her bows baton scarf a soft blue against your house colors. "Elodie will be brilliant," Claire said confidently, though her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. At the arena's center stood a circle of stones, each glowing faintly red, as if heated from within. Beyond them, a ring of fire spirits danced, creatures of living flame, their forms shifting between humanoid shapes and wild bursts of light. They moved in a hypnotic rhythm, their heat rippling the air, and you felt a prickle of awe and fear. The champion's task, announced by a ministry official in a booming voice, was to retrieve an enchanted relic, a small golden orb hidden within the circle of fire spirits. The champions must use their wits and magic to bypass the spirits, the official said, his mustache twitching with importance. Direct confrontation is unwise. Precision and control are key. You glanced at Lila, who raised an eyebrow. Precision? That's Amara's specialty, she whispered. You nodded. But your eyes were on the fire spirits, their flames licking higher as if sensing the challenge. The crowd fell silent as the champions emerged from a tent at the arena's edge, each in their school's colors. Amara in Hogwarts navy, Elodie in Beauxbatons blue, and Tomas in Durmstrang red. Amara's wand was already in her hand, her posture steady, but her face pale. Elodie moved with her usual grace, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, while Tomas strode forward like he was about to duel the flames themselves. Elodie went first, as decided by a draw. The Beauxbatons students cheered, Claire's voice loudest among them. Elodie approached the circle, her wand raised, and began to sing, a soft, lilting melody that seemed to weave through the air like a charm. The fire spirits paused, their flames dimming slightly, as if entranced. You leaned forward, amazed, as Elodie stepped closer, her song growing stronger. She flicked her wand, and a shimmering barrier of cool air formed around her, pushing back the heat. The spirits swayed, distracted, and she darted forward, snatching the orb with a deft hand. The crowd roared as she retreated, unharmed, the orb glinting in her grasp. Claire grabbed your arm, beaming. Told you, she said. She speaks to everything. Beasts, spirits, even fire. Thomas was next, and the Durmstrang boys chanted his name, their voices a low, rhythmic drumbeat. He didn't hesitate, striding toward the circle with his wand raised like a sword. Instead of charm or subtlety, he unleashed a torrent of water from his wand. The spell so powerful, it hissed as it met the fire spirits. Steam billowed, obscuring the arena, and you craned your neck, heart pounding. Through the mist, you saw Tomas lunge forward, his movements precise despite his size. A fire spirit flared toward him, its flames grazing his face. But he didn't flinch. He grabbed the orb and rolled back, emerging from the steam with a triumphant grin and singed eyebrows. The Durmstrang students roared, and even Lila laughed. He's mad, she said. But it worked. Amara's turn came last, and your hands clenched into fists as she stepped forward. The Hogwarts section erupted in cheers, and you joined in, shouting her name until your throat ached. Amara didn't look at the crowd. Her focus locked on the fire spirits, which seemed to burn hotter now, as if angered by the previous thefts. she raised her wand and began to cast, her lips moving in a complex incantation you couldn't hear. The air around the circle shimmered, and the flames slowed, their movements growing sluggish, as if caught in a web. You recognized the spell, a rare enchantment to bind elemental forces, one you'd seen her practice in the library. The spirits writhed, but Amara's magic held them, creating a narrow path through the circle. She moved quickly, her steps light but deliberate, and reached the orb. For a moment, it seemed too easy. Then a fire spirit broke free, its flames surging toward her. You gasped, but Amara spun, casting a shield charm that flared silver and deflected the fire. She grabbed the orb and sprinted back, her robes singed at the hem, but her face alight with triumph. The Hogwarts stands exploded, and you were on your feet, screaming with pride. Lila hugged you, laughing, and even Claire clapped, her smile genuine. "Your friend is formidable," she said, and you could only nod, your heart still racing. The champions stood together on the dais, each holding their orb, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. Dumbledore addressed the crowd, his voice warm. "A splendid start to the tournament," he said. "Each champion has shown courage and skill, and no one was gravely harmed, though young Mr. Skorick may need a mirror to mourn his eyebrows." Laughter rippled through the stands, and Thomas grinned, rubbing his now bare brow. The judges awarded points, with Elodie earning the highest for her flawless execution, followed closely by Amara, then Thomas. You didn't care about the scores. Amara had faced fire and won, and that was enough. As the crowd dispersed, you lingered in the stands, watching the fire spirits flicker out, their circle now just smoldering stones. The arena felt quieter, but the air still hummed with magic, with the weight of what you'd witnessed. You thought of Amara's steady hands, Elodie's haunting song, Tomas's reckless bravery. The tournament was no longer just stories. It was real, dangerous, and thrilling. You caught sight of Amara leaving the tent, her orb tucked under her arm, and waved. She waved back, her smile tired but bright. For a moment, you felt like you were part of her victory, part of this wild, impossible year. Back in the castle, the Great Hall was alive with chatter, students reenacting the task with exaggerated gestures. Lila was already speculating about the next one. "Bet it's water," she said, piling her plate with shepherd's pie. Or maybe a duel? You smiled, but your mind was still in the arena, replaying the dance of fire and magic. The Triwizard Tournament had only just begun, and already it was rewriting what you thought was possible. The first task had set Hogwarts ablaze with excitement, and the castle seemed to hum with a life of its own in the weeks that followed. The Triwizard Tournament wasn't just about the champions anymore. It had woven itself into every corner of the school, from the enchanted banners that shifted to display the champions' faces, to the whispered bets in the corridors about who would win the next task. You felt it too, a restless energy that made even the most mundane potions class feel like part of something grander. The presence of bow batons and Durmstrang students added a new rhythm to Hogwarts, their accents and magic mingling with your own, turning the castle into a tapestry of cultures and spells. Everywhere you went, the tournament was inescapable. The Great Hall was a riot of color, with Beau's Baton's pale blue banners fluttering alongside Durmstrang's crimson and Hogwarts house crests. The house elves, perhaps inspired by the occasion, had upped their game, serving dishes you'd never seen before, delicate French pastries for the Beau's Batons students, hearty stews for the Durmstrang boys, and for everyone. An endless supply of butterbeer that left students giggling and slightly tipsy. You and Lila spent meals dissecting the first task, replaying Amara's binding spell and Elodie's haunting song. Claire, your Beau's Baton's dorm mate, joined you often, her green eyes sparkling as she described the charms Elodie had used. "It's not just singing," she explained one morning over croissants. "It's a charm woven into the voice. My sister tried it once and charmed a whole flock of doves to sleep." Classes, too, had taken on a new flavor. The professors, perhaps spurred by the tournament's prestige, had introduced mixed lessons with the visiting students, blending Hogwarts's curriculum with Beau's Baton's elegance and Durmstrang's intensity. In charms, Professor Flitwick paired you with Claire for a lesson on atmospheric charms, and you watched, awestruck, as she conjured a miniature rain cloud that hovered over your desk, its droplets sparkling like diamonds. "It's simple," she said, blushing at your amazement. "You just feel the air." Her wand movements were fluid, like a dance, and though your own cloud looked more like a soggy sponge, you couldn't help but grin. "You're like a charm encyclopedia," you told her, and she laughed, promising to teach you a spell to make your notes glow. Durmstrang students, meanwhile, brought a different energy. In defense against the dark arts, a grizzled professor named Krumov led a session on dueling techniques, and you found yourself paired with a Durmstrang boy named Victor, who wielded his wand like a blade. His spells were sharp, almost brutal, but he was patient when you fumbled a shield charm, offering a gruff, "Try again, but faster." By the end of the lesson, you'd blocked one of his hexes, earning a rare nod of approval. Lila, watching from across the room, mouthed, "Show off?" But you could tell she was impressed. These mixed classes weren't just about learning. They were about seeing magic through new eyes, and you felt your own skills sharpening in response. The castle itself seemed to revel in the tournament's spirit. The staircases, always unpredictable, now shifted with a playful energy, as if eager to show off for the guests. Portraits chatted more than usual, their painted occupants swapping stories of past tournaments, some true, some wildly exaggerated. One particularly chatty knight in the Gryffindor corridor swore he'd seen a champion wrestle a troll in 1792, though you suspected he'd had too much painted mead. Even the house ghosts were caught up in the excitement. The Grey Lady gliding through the Ravenclaw common room with a rare smile, whispering about the nobility of competition. What struck you most, though, was the growing sense of unity among the houses. Hogwarts had always been divided. Gryffindors with their bravado, Slytherins with their cunning, Ravenclaws with their wit, Hufflepuffs with their loyalty, but the tournament seemed to blur those lines. You saw it in the way students cheered for Amara, not just as a Ravenclaw, but as Hogwarts champion. You felt it in the common room, where Hufflepuffs shared sweets with Slytherins, and Gryffindors debated strategy with Ravenclaws late into the night. One evening, you joined a group of mixed house students in the courtyard, where a Hufflepuff named Hannah was teaching a Durmstrang boy to play gobstones. His confusion at the game's squirting stones sent everyone into fits of laughter. And for a moment, it didn't matter who was from where. Everyone was just together. Your friendship with Claire deepened, too. She'd become a fixture at your side. Her quiet humor and endless knowledge of charms making her a perfect companion. One afternoon, as you practiced a levitation spell by the lake, she showed you a Beauxbatons trick, a charm that made objects float in a spiral, like petals caught in a breeze. "It's for decoration," she said, her wand tracing delicate arcs. "But it's also calming." You tried it, and though your spiral was more of a wobbly loop, she clapped like you'd mastered it. In return, you taught her a Hogwarts prank spell that made quills squeak like mice, and her laughter echoed across the water, drawing curious looks from a passing Durmstrang student. The tournament's influence even reached the Quidditch pitch, where pickup games now included players from all 3 schools. You weren't much for flying, but Lila dragged you to watch one match where Thomas Skorrick, the Durmstrang champion, played beater with terrifying precision, sending bludgers soaring with a flick of his bat. Amara, too, joined a game, her enchanted broom responding to her charms like an extension of her wand. Watching her weave through the air, you felt a surge of pride. She wasn't just your friend. She was a force, a champion who carried Hogwarts' hopes. As the days passed, you noticed small changes in yourself. You were bolder in classes, quicker to raise your hand, inspired by the champion's courage and the visitor's skills. You found yourself talking to students you'd never spoken to before. A shy Hufflepuff who knew every plant in the greenhouse. A Durmstrang girl who carved runes into her wand for extra power. The castle was alive, not just with magic, but with connection, with the sense that you were all part of something bigger. The tournament had brought more than competition. It had brought a new kind of magic, one that sparked in shared laughter, in late-night debates, in the way Claire's glowing ink lit up your notes. One evening, as you sat in the great hall, the enchanted banners above shifted to show the champions' faces. Amara's thoughtful gaze, Elodie's serene smile, Tomas's fierce grin. You looked around at the crowded tables, at Claire joking with Lila, at a Slytherin and a Durmstrang boy comparing wands. The castle was buzzing, alive with wonder, and you felt it in your bones. This year was rewriting what Hogwarts could be. You didn't know what the next task would bring, but for now, you were content to soak in the magic of it all, to live in a castle where every day felt like a new adventure. The anticipation for the Yule Ball had been building for weeks. A bright spark in the midst of the Triwizard Tournament's intensity. By mid-December, Hogwarts was transformed, its corridors glittering with frost and fairy lights that danced like will-o'-the-wisps. The castle seemed to know something magical was coming, and the buzz of excitement was infectious. Students whispered about dress robes, practiced dance steps in empty classrooms, and debated who would ask whom. You felt the flutter of nerves yourself, wondering if you'd find the courage to ask someone, or if you'd end up going alone, which, honestly, didn't sound so bad. The idea of the ball, with its promise of music and laughter, felt like a much-needed break from the tournament's high stakes. The Great Hall was unrecognizable when you stepped inside on the night of the Yule Ball. The usual long tables were gone, replaced by round ones draped in silver cloth, each glowing with floating candles that cast a warm, golden light. The enchanted ceiling was a masterpiece, swirling with soft snowflakes that fell but never reached the floor, melting into sparkles just above your head. Icicles hung from the walls, refracting light like prisms, and a massive Christmas tree stood at one end, its branches heavy with ornaments that sang softly when you passed. The air smelled of cinnamon and something sweet, probably the butterbeer flowing freely from a fountain shaped like a phoenix. You'd spent hours getting ready, your dorm a chaos of robes, hair charms, and nervous laughter. Lila had insisted on helping you with a spell to tame your hair, though her first attempt left it sticking out like a puffskyne's fur. Claire, ever the expert, stepped in with a beau's baton's charm that made your hair fall in soft waves, and you returned the favor by lending her a Hogwarts cloak pin that shimmered with your house crest. Your dress robes, simple but elegant, in a deep shade that complemented your eyes, felt strange but right, like you were stepping into a version of yourself you hadn't met yet. The question of a date had loomed large, and after much agonizing, you'd decided to ask a Hufflepuff named Oliver, a quiet boy from your herbology class who always had dirt under his nails and a kind smile. He'd blushed furiously when you'd asked him by the greenhouses, stammering a yes that made your own cheeks burn. Now, as you entered the hall together, his hand warm in yours, you felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Oliver looked surprisingly polished in his robes, though he kept tugging at his collar. "This is a lot," he whispered, eyeing the crowd. You nodded, squeezing his hand. "We'll survive," you said, and he grinned, relaxing a little. The champions opened the ball, as tradition demanded. Amara, radiant in navy robes that shimmered with silver threads, danced with a Ravenclaw 7th year, who looked as nervous as you felt. Elodie, in flowing blue silk, moved like she was floating. Her partner, a beau's baton's boy, who matched her grace. Tomas, his red robes stark against the snowy decor, led a Durmstrang girl with a confidence that made every step look like a dual one. The crowd parted as they took the floor, their movements accompanied by a waltz played by a band of enchanted instruments. violins that bowed themselves, a flute that hovered in midair. You watched, mesmerized, as Amara's robes caught the light, her smile brighter than you'd seen since the tournament began. Soon, the floor opened to everyone, and Oliver led you out, his steps tentative but earnest. You weren't much of a dancer, but the music, a lilting melody that seemed to pull you along, made it easy to forget your awkwardness. Around you, students from all 3 schools spun and laughed, their differences blurring in the whirl of motion. Claire was dancing with a Gryffindor, her laughter ringing out as he spun her too fast. Lila, who'd boldly gone alone, was twirling with a Durmstrang boy, her grin wide enough to light the hall. Even the professors joined in. McGonagall, surprisingly graceful, danced with Flitwick, who stood on a floating platform to match her height. The night unfolded in a haze of joy. You and Oliver took a break to sip butterbeer, which somehow ended up spilled on your shoes when he tripped over a chair. You laughed it off, the sticky mess feeling like part of the adventure. Later, you danced with Lila, the 2 of you inventing ridiculous moves that had Claire doubled over with giggles. At one point, you caught Amara's eye across the floor. She was laughing, her partner attempting a dramatic dip that nearly sent them both sprawling. She waved, and you waved back, feeling a surge of pride for your friend, who carried the weight of the tournament, but could still shine like this. As the night wore on, the music slowed, and couples drew closer. Oliver, emboldened by the butterbeer or the magic of the moment, asked you for another dance. This one was quieter, the snowflakes above casting soft shadows on his face. You talked as you swayed about herbology, the tournament, the way the castle felt alive tonight. "I'm glad you asked me," he said, his voice shy but sincere. You smiled, your heart warm. "Me too," you replied. And for a moment, the world was just the 2 of you, the music and the snow. The ball wasn't all perfection. There were awkward moments, stepped on toes, a Beaux Batons boy who tried to charm his partner's shoes to dance on their own, only to send them skittering into the punch bowl. You saw a Slytherin girl storm off after her date flirted with a Durmstrang student, and a group of first years who'd snuck in were caught by Snape, his glare enough to send them scurrying. But even the mishaps felt like part of the magic, the kind of chaos that made memories. By midnight, the hall was a warm blur of tired smiles and flushed cheeks. You sat with Claire and Lila at a table, nibbling on chocolate truffles that melted like spells on your tongue. The champions were mingling now, no longer the center of attention, and you saw Amara laughing with Elodie, their heads bent close like old friends. Tomas was nearby, telling a story to a group of Durmstrang boys, his hands gesturing wildly. The sight made you smile. The tournament was fierce, but tonight it was just a dance, a chance to be young and alive. As the band played its final notes, Dumbledore took the floor, his voice gentle but carrying. "A night to remember," he said, his eyes twinkling. "May you carry this joy with you, for it is as much a part of magic as any spell." The crowd cheered, and you joined in, your hands stinging from clapping. You left the hall with Oliver, Claire, and Lila, your shoes still sticky with butterbeer, your heart full. Outside, the snow was real now, falling softly on the grounds, and you paused to watch it, the castle glowing behind you. The Yule Ball had been everything you'd hoped. Laughter, awkwardness, connection, and you knew you'd carry it with you, a bright memory in a year of wonders. Winter had settled over Hogwarts like a heavy cloak, the grounds blanketed in snow, and the black lake frozen at its edges, its surface a dark mirror under the February sky. The second task of the Triwizard Tournament loomed, and the castle was alive with speculation about what the champions would face. The first task's fire spirits had set a high bar, and you'd overheard wild theories, everything from merpeople battles to underwater dragons. Lila, ever practical, scoffed at most of them. "It's a lake," she said one morning over breakfast, stabbing a sausage with her fork. "Bet they have to swim for something. Maybe fight a Grindylow." You nodded, but the thought of Amara diving into those icy depths made your stomach twist. She'd been quieter since the first task, her usual spark dimmed by long nights in the library, studying spells you couldn't even pronounce. The morning of the second task, you joined the crowd at the lake's edge, bundled in your warmest cloak. Temporary stands had been erected, charmed to keep the wind at bay, but the air was still sharp enough to sting your cheeks. Claire sat beside you, her Beauxbatons scarf wrapped twice around her neck, while Lila fidgeted, unable to sit still. The lake was unnervingly calm, its surface reflecting the gray clouds above. A platform floated at the center, where Dumbledore stood with Madame Maxime and Karkaroff, their faces unreadable. The champions were nowhere in sight, hidden in a tent at the shore. and you craned your neck, hoping for a glimpse of Amara. A ministry official, the same mustachioed man from the first task, addressed the crowd with a sonorous charm. "For the second task," he boomed, "each champion must retrieve a cherished object from the depths of the Black Lake. But beware, the lake's magic will test their minds, clouding memories and twisting truths. They have 1 hour to return with their treasure." The crowd murmured, and you exchanged a glance with Claire. "Memories?" she whispered, her green eyes wide. "That's cruel." You nodded, your heart sinking. Amara was brilliant with enchantments, but if the lake messed with her mind, would her spells hold? The champions emerged, dressed in sleek swimwear, charmed to resist the cold. Amara's navy suit bore the Hogwarts crest, her wand clutched tightly. Elodie, in pale blue, looked serene as ever, her auburn hair braided tightly. Tomas, in red, flexed his shoulders like a duelist warming up. They stood at the platform's edge, wands raised, and you held your breath as a horn sounded, signaling the start. One by one, they cast spells, Amara with a bubblehead charm that enveloped her head in a shimmering sphere, Elodie with a charm that seemed to make her skin glow faintly, and Tomas with a spell that turned his legs into fins. A Durmstrang specialty that drew gasps from the crowd. Then, with barely a ripple, they dove into the lake and vanished. The stands were tense, the crowd straining to see any sign of movement. The lake gave nothing away, its surface smooth as glass. You gripped the edge of your seat, your mind racing with images of what might be happening below. Merpeople, kelpies, or worse. Lila muttered under her breath, "Come on, Amara," while Claire whispered a soft prayer in French for Elodie. Minutes dragged like hours, and you kept glancing at the giant hourglass on the platform, its sand trickling too fast. The professors watched in silence, though you noticed McGonagall's hands clasped tightly, and even Snape seemed less composed, his eyes fixed on the water. After 20 agonizing minutes, a ripple broke the surface, and Elodie emerged, gasping but triumphant. In her hand was a phoenix feather, its fiery glow undimmed by the water. The Beauxbatons students roared, Claire leaping to her feet with a cry of relief. Elodie swam to the platform, her face pale but her smile radiant as she presented the feather to the judges. "Her mother's," Claire explained, her voice thick with pride. "It was her first gift, when she showed magic? You nodded, impressed by Elodie's speed, but your eyes were back on the lake, searching for Amara. Toma surfaced next. 10 minutes later, his broad frame shaking as he hauled himself onto the platform. He held a small, weathered wand, its wood chipped but glowing faintly. The Durmstrang boys cheered, their voices a low rumble, and Tomas raised the wand like a trophy. His childhood wand, a Durmstrang student behind you said. He broke it in his first duel. You shivered, imagining what it must have been like to swim through a lake that twisted your memories, forcing you to remember what mattered most. The hourglass was nearly empty when the lake rippled again, and Amara broke the surface, her bubblehead charm flickering as she gasped for air. In her hand was a book, its leather cover sodden but intact, its pages glowing with protective charms. The Hogwarts stands erupted, and you were on your feet, screaming her name. Lila hugged you, laughing, and even Claire clapped, her smile warm. Amara climbed onto the platform, shivering but steady, and presented the book to Dumbledore. He took it gently, his eyes soft with understanding. Her mentors? You heard a Ravenclaw whisper nearby. Professor Flitwick gave it to her in 3rd year. Your chest swelled with pride. Amara had done it, faced the lake's magic, and won. The judges conferred as the champions were wrapped in warm blankets, their faces a mix of exhaustion and relief. Dumbledore addressed the crowd, his voice warm. A remarkable display of courage and clarity, he said. Each champion has retrieved a piece of their heart, proving their strength lies not just in magic, but in memory. Elodie earned the highest points for her speed, followed by Tomas, then Amara. But you didn't care about the scores. Amara was safe, clutching her book like it was a lifeline, and that was enough. As the crowd began to disperse, you lingered by the shore, watching the lake settle back into stillness. The champions were escorted to the castle, but you caught Amara's eye as she passed. She looked drained, her dark eyes shadowed, but she managed a small wave. You waved back, your throat tight. The lake had tested more than their magic. It had forced them to confront their pasts, to hold on to what mattered most. You thought of the book in Amara's hand, the feather in Elodie's, the wand in Thomas's. Each object was a story, a piece of who they were. Back in the Great Hall, The mood was lighter, students buzzing with relief and pride. Lila was already speculating about the third task, but you were quieter, still thinking of the lake's dark depths. Claire sat beside you, her usual cheer subdued. It was heavy. Yes? She said softly. To see them fight their memories. You nodded, grateful for her understanding. The tournament was thrilling, but it was also real. Its challenges cutting deeper than you'd expected. As you sipped hot chocolate, the warmth spreading through you, you felt a new respect for the champions and for the magic that bound you all together in this extraordinary year. The second task had left Hogwarts in a state of awe and unease. The champions' triumphs over the Black Lake's memory-twisting magic, fueling both pride and whispered questions. What else could the tournament demand? The castle, already alive with the energy of the Triwizard Tournament, seemed to hum with a new undercurrent, as if its stones were holding secrets just out of reach. You noticed it first in the small things. A candle flickering when no one was near. A staircase hesitating before shifting. A faint hum in the air during Charms class. Lila, ever the skeptic, blamed it on the tournament's magic overloading the castle's wards. But you weren't so sure. Something felt off, like a spell cast slightly askew. It started with the portraits. You were hurrying to Transfiguration one morning, your bag heavy with books, when you passed a painting of a medieval witch stirring a cauldron. She looked up, her painted eyes sharp, and whispered, "Beware the goblet's choice." You froze, certain you'd misheard, but when you turned back, she was stirring again, silent as ever. You told Lila at lunch, expecting her to laugh, but she frowned, glancing at the portraits lining the great hall. "Mine said something yesterday," she admitted, her voice low. A knight in the third-floor corridor muttered about false champions. Creepy, right? You nodded, a chill creeping up your spine. The portraits had always been chatty, but this felt different, urgent, secretive. Claire noticed it too. During a late-night study session in the common room, she paused mid-charm, her wand still glowing. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her green eyes darting to a portrait of a sleeping wizard. You strained your ears and caught it. A faint whisper, like wind through leaves, coming from the canvas. "It's been happening all week," she said, her French accent thick with unease. "They talk when they think we're not listening." You exchanged a glance, both of you sensing the same unspoken question. were the portraits trying to warn you. The strangest incident came in the astronomy tower. You'd gone there with Lila and a Hufflepuff named Hannah to finish a star chart. The night sky clear through the tower's open roof. A large, ornate mirror stood in the corner, its frame carved with runes you didn't recognize. You'd seen it before, but never paid much attention, until it shimmered, its surface rippling like water. Instead of reflecting you, Lila, and Hannah, it showed 3 figures. A girl with a phoenix feather, a boy with a chipped wand, and a girl holding a glowing book. Elodie, Tomas, Amara, the champions. But something was wrong. Their faces were distorted, their eyes hollow, and the mirror's Amara held a different book, its cover black and pulsing with red light. Lila, you whispered, grabbing her arm. She stared, her mouth open, as Hannah backed away, her star chart forgotten. That's not them, Hannah said, her voice trembling. The mirror flickered, and the images vanished, leaving only your reflections. You stood there, hearts pounding, until a creak from the stairs sent you scrambling back to your dorms. None of you spoke of it that night, but the next day, you found Lila in the library, poring over a book on magical mirrors. It's old magic, she said, her voice hushed. Mirrors like that can show truths or lies. We need to figure out which. The 3 of you, joined by Claire, who was intrigued by the mystery, decided to investigate. The tournament's magic was clearly stirring something in the castle, and you couldn't shake the feeling that the portraits and mirror were connected. You started with the library, combing through dusty tomes on the Triwizard Tournament's history. Most were filled with tales of glory, but a few mentioned darker moments, champions betrayed, tasks rigged, even a goblet that once chose a false champion who vanished before the final task. One book, its pages brittle and sealed with enchanted ink, caught your eye. It was locked with a charm, its cover embossed with the tournament's crest, a goblet wreathed in flames. Claire, with her knack for charms, broke the seal with a whispered incantation, her wand glowing softly. The book opened to a passage about the Goblet of Fire's origins, describing it as a vessel of ancient magic, capable of seeing a champion's heart, but also vulnerable to tampering. In times of strife, the text read, the goblet's choices may reflect not truth, but shadows cast by those who seek to control it. You exchanged looks, the words sinking in. Could someone be interfering with the tournament? The idea seemed absurd. Dumbledore's wards were ironclad, but the mirror's images and the portrait's whispers suggested otherwise. Your investigation took you to the Room of Requirement, a place you'd only heard rumors about until Hannah, who'd stumbled into it last year, led the way. The room appeared as a cluttered archive, its shelves lined with scrolls and artifacts tied to past tournaments. You found a faded journal from a 17th century champion, its pages detailing strange occurrences, portraits warning of danger, a task that shifted mid-competition, a goblet that flared red instead of blue. "It's happening again," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The castle is reacting." You decided to confront Amara, hoping she'd seen something too. You found her in the Ravenclaw common room, her mentor's book open on her lap. She listened as you described the mirror and portraits, her dark eyes narrowing. "I've felt it," she admitted, her voice low. "In the champion's tent, before the second task, the air felt heavy, like something was watching." She hesitated, then added, "And my dreams, they've been strange. I keep seeing a maze, but it's not the Forbidden Forest. It's wrong." You shared what you'd found in the library, and though Amara was skeptical, she agreed to keep an eye out. The days that followed were tense, the castle's oddities growing. A suit of armor sang a dirge in the dead of night, waking half your dorm. A tapestry in the Gryffindor corridor unraveled itself, revealing a faded image of a goblet surrounded by shadowy figures. You and your friends kept searching, but answers were elusive. The enchanted ink in the library book fading before you could read more. Still, the investigation brought you closer. Lila's sharp wit, Claire's charm expertise, Hannah's quiet determination, and your own persistence forming a team as tight as any Quidditch squad. One night, as you sat by the lake, the four of you discussed what you'd found. The moon cast a silver glow, and Claire's vial of moonlight ink glinted in her pocket, a reminder of the tournament's brighter moments. "Maybe it's not about stopping the tournament," Hannah said, her voice thoughtful. "Maybe it's about understanding it." You nodded, feeling the weight of the mystery, but also a spark of excitement. The castle was speaking, and you were listening, piecing together secrets older than Hogwarts itself. The third task was approaching, and though you didn't know what it held, you felt ready, not just to watch, but to uncover whatever truth the castle was hiding. The whispers of the castle's strange happenings lingered like a spell, casting a shadow over the weeks leading to the third and final task of the Triwizard Tournament. The air at Hogwarts felt charged, as if the very stones were bracing for what was to come. The portraits still murmured cryptic warnings, and the memory of the astronomy tower's mirror, its distorted images of the champions, haunted your thoughts. You, Lila, Claire, and Hannah had pored over every clue you could find, but the enchanted ink in the library's book had faded completely, leaving only fragments of warnings about the Goblet of Fire's unpredictable magic. Despite the mystery, the school buzzed with anticipation for the final task, and you couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and excitement. The tournament was building to its climax, and you were part of it, even if only as a witness. The third task was announced on a misty May evening. The great hall filled with students from all three schools, their faces lit by the flickering candles above. Dumbledore stood at the high table, his presence calming the restless crowd. "The final task," he said, his voice resonant, "will take place in the Forbidden Forest, where a living maze has been conjured under the magic of the full moon. The champions will enter at sunset, seeking not a prize, but a truth, a memory that defines who they are." The hall erupted in whispers, and you glanced at Lila, who raised an eyebrow. "A memory," she muttered. "Sounds like the lake all over again." Claire, sitting beside you, leaned in. "It's deeper than that," she said softly. "Beau's Batons has mazes like this. They change you." The day of the task arrived. The Forbidden Forest transformed into an arena that dwarfed the first task's fiery circle. The stands, charmed to hover above the treetops, offered a view of the maze's entrance, a towering arch of twisted vines that pulsed with green light. The maze itself was alive, its walls of thorns and roots shifting under the moonlight, their movements accompanied by faint whispers, like the castle's portraits. You sat with Lila, Claire, and Hannah, your breath visible in the cool night air. The crowd was quieter than before, the weight of the tournament's final challenge settling over everyone. The champions, Amara, Elodie, and Thomas, stood at the arch, their faces set with determination. Amara's navy robes glowed faintly, a charm of her own making, while Elodie's blue silk shimmered like water, and Tomas's red cloak looked almost black in the moonlight. The horn sounded, and the champions entered the maze one by one, disappearing into its shifting depths. The stands were silent, every eye straining to catch a glimpse through the dense foliage. The maze seemed to swallow sound itself, but every so often, strange echoes drifted out, laughter, sharp and bright, then a low howl that sent shivers down your spine, followed by faint strains of music, like a lute played far away. You gripped Lila's hand, your heart pounding. "What's in there?" you whispered. She shook her head, her usual bravado gone. "Something big," she said. Claire's eyes were fixed on the maze, her lips moving in a silent prayer for Elodie. The maze's magic was unlike anything you'd seen. From the stands, you caught glimpses of its tricks, vines that lashed out like whips, paths that vanished mid-step, shadows that moved without a source. The crowd gasped as a burst of light flared from the maze's heart, followed by a chorus of ethereal voices. You thought of Amara's dreams, the maze she'd described. Wrong, in a way she couldn't name, and wondered if this was what she'd seen. The portrait's warnings, the mirror's false champions, the journal's talk of a tampered goblet. All of it swirled in your mind, but there was no time to dwell. The champions were in there, facing whatever the maze demanded. Elodie emerged first, after what felt like hours, but was only 40 minutes. She stumbled from the arch, her face pale, but her eyes bright, clutching a small, glowing crystal that pulsed with a soft light. The Beauxbatons students cheered, Claire leaping to her feet, tears in her eyes, Elodie's crystal. You later learned, held a memory of her first flight on a broom, a moment of pure joy that defined her courage. She collapsed onto a bench, her breath ragged, but her smile serene. And you marveled at her strength, her ability to face the maze's trials and emerge whole. Thomas was next, his broad frame pushing through the vines with a grunt. He held nothing tangible, but his face was alight with something fierce and proud. The Durmstrang boys roared, and you overheard one say Thomas had faced a vision of his younger self, choosing to fight for honor rather than glory. His eyes, usually sharp with challenge, were softer now, as if the maze had stripped away his armor. He nodded to the judges, his chest heaving, and sat heavily, his red cloak stained with sap and earth. Amara took the longest, and your heart was in your throat as the hour mark approached. The maze's echoes grew louder, more laughter, more howls, a crescendo of music that sounded like a warning. Finally, she staggered out, her robes torn, and her face streaked with dirt. But her eyes were fierce, alive. She carried no object, but her hands glowed faintly, as if she'd woven a spell to carry her through. The Hogwarts stands erupted, and you screamed her name, your voice hoarse. Lila hugged you, laughing, while Hannah clapped wildly. Amara met your gaze and gave a tired smile, her hands trembling as she joined the other champions. The judges, led by Dumbledore, conferred as the crowd buzzed. The maze faded behind them, its vines retreating into the forest like a dream dissolving. Dumbledore stepped forward, his voice warm but solemn. The maze was not about victory, but about discovery, he said. Each champion faced a memory, a dream, a vision, a choice that revealed their true selves. They have all succeeded, not in winning, but in becoming. The crowd cheered, but you barely heard, your eyes on Amara, Elodie, and Tomas, who stood together, their faces a mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Later, you learned their stories. Elodie's crystal held her first moment of magic, a spark that had lit her path. Tomas's vision had forced him to choose between fame and loyalty, and he'd chosen the latter. Amara, though, spoke of a choice, a memory of her mentor urging her to trust herself, even when the maze tried to make her doubt. It wasn't about finding something. She told you later, her voice soft. It was about knowing who I am. You listened, awed, feeling the weight of her words. The maze hadn't just tested the champions, it had reshaped them, and in watching, you felt changed too. As the stands emptied, you lingered with Lila, Claire, and Hannah, the moon casting long shadows over the forest. The castle loomed behind you, its lights warm against the night. The tournament's final task had been unlike anything you'd expected. Not a battle, but a journey inward. You thought of the castle's whispers, the mirror's shadows, and wondered if the maze had been part of their warning or their answer. For now, though, you were content to stand with your friends, the air alive with the magic of a year that had already transformed you all. The air in the Forbidden Forest clearing was thick with anticipation as the third task's echoes faded. The living maze retreating into the earth like a dream dissolving under dawn's light. The stands, hovering above the treetops, buzzed with students from Hogwarts, Bose Batons, and Durmstrang, their voices a mix of awe and impatience as they awaited the judge's verdict. you sat with Lila, Claire, and Hannah, your hands still trembling from the intensity of watching Amara, Elodie, and Tomas emerge from the maze. The moonlight bathed the scene in silver, and the castle loomed in the distance, its towers glowing faintly as if watching too. The tournament had built to this moment, and you could feel the weight of it, like a spell waiting to be cast. The champions stood on a conjured dais at the clearing center, their faces etched with the toll of the maze's trials. Amara's navy robes were torn at the hem, her dark eyes bright but weary. Elodie, clutching her glowing crystal, stood with her usual grace, though her auburn braid was frayed, strands catching the moonlight. Tomas, his red cloak streaked with dirt, held himself tall, but his shoulders sagged slightly, as if the maze had taken more than he'd expected. You watched them, your heart swelling with pride for Amara, your friend, but also for Elodie's quiet strength and Tomas's fierce resolve. They were no longer just names or champions. They were people you'd come to know, their stories woven into the fabric of this year. Dumbledore stepped forward, flanked by Madame, Maxime, and Karkaroff, their expressions unreadable. The Goblet of Fire, brought from the castle for the final judgment, stood on a plinth beside them, its flames low but steady, a soft blue that pulsed like a heartbeat. The crowd hushed, every eye on the goblet, waiting for it to declare the winner. You leaned forward, your breath catching. Lila gripped your arm, whispering, "It's got to be Amara, right? She was brilliant." Claire, loyal to Elodie, shook her head. "Elodie found her memory first," she said softly. Hannah, ever the peacemaker, stayed quiet, but her eyes darted between the champions, as if she couldn't choose. The goblet's flames flickered, and a murmur rippled through the stands. You thought of the castle's strange happenings, the whispering portraits, the mirror's distorted champions, the journal's warnings about a tampered goblet. Had they been leading to this? You half expected the flames to flare red, like the journal's tale of a false champion, but instead, they surged upward, a brilliant gold that lit the clearing like a sunrise. The crowd gasped, and you felt a jolt, as if the magic had reached into your chest. The flames didn't spit out a parchment or a name. They simply burned, steady and bright, casting golden light across the champions' faces. Dumbledore's eyes widened, a rare flicker of surprise crossing his face before his smile returned. broader than ever. "Extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying over the stunned silence. "For the first time in the history of the Triwizard Tournament, the Goblet of Fire has declared not one winner, but 3. The crowd erupted, cheers and gasps mingling as students leapt to their feet. You were on yours, too, shouting with Lila, Claire, and Hannah, your voices lost in the roar. Amara, Elodie, and Tomas looked at each other, their expressions shifting from shock to something softer, understanding, perhaps, or relief. Dumbledore raised a hand, and the noise quieted, though the energy remained electric. The goblet has judged each champion worthy, he continued, not for outshining the others, but for embodying the spirit of the tournament, courage, ingenuity, and the strength to face their truest selves. Amara Valen, Elodie Marchand, Tomas Skorik, you are all champions. He gestured to the goblet, its golden flames still burning. This is a moment of unity, a testament to what we can achieve when we stand together. The champions moved almost as one, stepping closer on the dais. Amara reached out, her hand finding Elodie's, who took Tomas's. They bowed to each other, then raised their joined hands, and the crowd exploded again, the sound shaking the stands. You clapped until your hands ached, tears pricking your eyes. It wasn't just pride for Amara, or admiration for Elodie and Tomas. It was the beauty of it, the way the tournament had defied its own rules to honor something deeper. Lila was laughing, her voice hoarse from cheering, while Claire wiped her eyes, murmuring, C'est magnifique. Hannah, usually so reserved, was beaming, her hands clasped like she was holding on to the moment. The judges, Dumbledore, Maxime, and Karkaroff, conferred briefly. But there was no debate. The goblet's decision was final. Its golden flames, a verdict no one could argue with. The prize of 1,000 galleons, Dumbledore announced, would be split equally among the champions, to be used for their schools or their futures as they saw fit. But the money felt secondary. The real prize was the sight of the 3 champions standing together, their differences forgotten in the glow of shared triumph. You thought of the maze, its shifting paths and haunting echoes, and realized it had tested not just their magic, but their hearts. As the crowd began to disperse, you lingered in the stands, watching the champions step down from the dais. Amara caught your eye and waved, her smile tired, but radiant. You waved back, your chest tight with emotion. She'd faced fire, water, and a maze that forced her to confront herself, and she'd emerged not just a champion, but your friend, stronger than ever. Elodie and Thomas joined her, the three talking quietly, their laughter soft in the night air. You wondered what they were saying, maybe sharing what the maze had shown them, or maybe just reveling in the fact that they'd all made it through. The goblet's flames dimmed, returning to their usual blue, and the clearing began to empty. Students streaming back to the castle under the starry sky. You walked with Lila, Claire, and Hannah. The four of you quiet at first, processing what you'd witnessed. No single winner, Lila said finally, kicking a pebble. That's new? Claire nodded, her moonlight ink vial glinting in her pocket. It's right, she said. They all deserved it. Hannah, her voice thoughtful, added, It's like the tournament wanted to say something about us, about all of us. You didn't reply, but you felt it too, a sense that the goblet's choice was more than a verdict. It was a message, a reminder of what magic could do when it united, rather than divided. Back in the Great Hall, the celebration was already underway. Tables laden with desserts and butterbeer, the enchanted ceiling swirling with golden sparks to match the goblet's flames. You sat with your friends, toasting the champions with goblets that fizzed over, the laughter and music washing over you, the castle's strange happenings, the portraits, the mirror, the journal, felt distant now, as if the goblet's golden light had banished their shadows. Maybe they'd been warnings, or maybe they'd been part of the tournament's magic, guiding you to this moment. Either way, you felt proud, like you'd witnessed something ancient and beautiful, something that would stay with you long after the tournament ended.